Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and I hope for all of you in the United States you had a great Thanksgiving a few days ago. It was pretty awesome on my end, and always, like I said, my favorite holiday. It was great meeting up with family, talking to family, all that stuff. So this week we have something going on just a little bit different. It's a pre-recorded show, and it's just ahead of when the show airs live. It had to do with a scheduling conflict from our guests. So we figured that we'd do this first and record, and it's just like it will be live. There's absolutely no editing. And the good thing, I think it's a good thing, if you're watching live on YouTube or on Facebook, then I will be in the chat room, so interacting there. So Peter Maxwell Slattery, he was first on back in 2013. And we welcome him back. He has a film out that's called Multidimensional. He has some great footage. I've looked at it when he was on here. He was on here 2 times over the past several years. And so we'll be running the trailer of the movie coming up in just a bit. And we're going to find out when that's going to be available and all that. Peter's from Australia, and we do have a large listening audience there. I think it's either second or third in the entire world out of and for kind of a small population, 26 million people or so, somewhere around there. So it's always amazed me how really big into the UFO topic people in Australia are. So big news. I heard about this on Thanksgiving Day. Is the Defense Department at the Pentagon has a new office, and it's dedicated to investigating UFOs, UAPs, whatever you'd like to call them. It's called the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. So the acronym for it is AOIMSG. Well, I guess you call it a SUMAGA, something like that. But I'm wondering if they made it that long just so people would get tired of reading it over and over again or something, or it's kind of a strange kind of overkill on the name there. But so OSMAGA will specifically focus on unexplained phenomena that pass through military airspace. And it's kind of a shame that's all they're going to focus on, but I think it probably has to do with the data that they can collect much more efficiently through military airspace. I suppose that's what it is. And it's the group will be directed by and under the Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. OSMAGA will be the successor to the Navy Department called the Unidentified Phenomenon Task Force. So that's what is going on there. We have a blog up this week. I didn't get to hear from Charles before I'm recording to figure out what that is about, what the title is and all that. But check it out over at podcastufo.com. It'll be on our website. And along with that, there's also our Patreon page. And I want to thank those who reached out from last week and are now supporting the show. It means very much to me. Thank you very much. And that is also, there's a link on our website at podcastufo.com. We're also on Facebook. There's, I think, 20 some odd thousand people over there at our Facebook page, and about the same amount, I believe, on our Twitter. I'm not really too active when it comes to social media of any kind these days. Sorry about that, but a lot of people have contacted me through social media, and that's always a useful tool. But I just don't go on the platform too much at all these days. And there's a lot of UFO stuff on. Occasionally, someone will send me something that's linked on Facebook, and of course, I will check it out there. But anyway, here's our guest. I'm bringing in Peter right now. Peter, welcome to the show.
Great to connect again, Martin.
I know it's been, I can't remember the last time you were on it, but I think it was 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Yeah, there's a couple of times, like you're saying, was it 2013 was the first time? So yeah, it's been a couple of times since then.
Yeah. And you have a new film out. And what inspired you to, was it your idea to come up with this film, or did someone approach you? How did that all work out?
I did it myself, and funny enough, it's on myself. But how this came into fruition was I've done Contact Has Begun 2 for James Gilliland. I've done a couple of other films as well. And firstly, I've got to say, I don't see myself as a filmmaker. I'm just trying to tell a story I don't think I'm a filmmaker, though I can just put it together. And it was in a period of a week. I actually had John Vivanco, who's in the movie. He's a professional remote viewer. He's worked for a think tank for the FBI, NASA, a lot of different intelligence agencies, as well as corporations, so on and so on. And Jason Gleaves, who's from UFO Only, he's a image analysis expert, ex-UK Air Force and Aerospace. And James, John, and Jason within a week said, you should just make your own film. And there was other opportunities in the past, but I thought having different people's perspectives and looking at it from a remote viewing perspective, and also having the image analysis done, and then bringing in somebody like Mary Rodwell as well, who's been at this for over 25 years, it was going to bring just a take on my case and my story to where I talk a little bit about the experiences and I try to go into the consciousness aspect. But mainly I wanted to make this for something, for basically a family or anyone that's got nothing to do with the topic to be able to watch it, but also go into the deeper aspect of where this topic leads, which I don't know about yourself, but I know a lot of researchers in this community that have been at it longer than I've been alive. And we can even look at somebody like J.L.N. Hynek, that eventually it shifted to the conscious aspect. It wasn't the nuts and bolts anymore. It was the conscious aspect of the phenomena, but also how these beings and their crafts, not only is there a physical aspect to it, but they can also go multidimensional. And what I mean by that is, and hundreds of people have experienced this with me, it's on video, it's in the film, the beings, they can be extraterrestrial, but what I say is extraterrestrials are the bottom 5% of what's out there from my own experience. Once you get past extraterrestrials, you start to go into realms and places that have no planets, no stars. It's completely different ballpark. But the same mechanism, whether it's transdimensional beings, extraterrestrials, we could say the paranormal phenomena, they're using a mechanism in some cases, depending on their level of consciousness, to where they can appear like a ghost. And before I was known for this, I was somebody that was called to the most haunted places in Australia to work out what was going on. And what I found in some cases, especially in house calls, is that some people that thought they were having hauntings happening, they were actually having ET contact. And some people that thought they were having ET contact had residual or intelligent hauntings, because they can appear as apparitions. They can even land the craft on you like a ghost. So I'm going a bit ahead here, but this is the basis that I wanted to bring to the world, because when I'm talking behind the scenes with a lot of researchers and people in military and what have you, they understand this. They don't know how it works, but they understand that this is a main part of the phenomena. And that's what I wanted to bring to light in a very digestible way, with evidence that I could produce to sort of give people a reference point for that.
Wow, interesting. I have to be open-minded to about anything for what these things are. And I would say that this is the first time I've heard what you're saying, but it's not. There is a researcher, a longtime researcher and a friend, Paul Eno, and he's been talking about this type of thing for, I don't know, maybe 4 years. He runs a radio show out on Rhode Island, and it's mostly, terrestrial radio, but his podcasts are available. But I was kind of shocked when he first said along those lines, where he thought, this whole ball of wax that people are seeing, meaning ghosts, meaning UFOs, beings, and all these things that are happening might be a multi-dimensional type of thing. Every bit of it might be multi-dimensional. Now, I tend to think that, and I just heard you say this, that whatever it is may be coming from other places as well, not just that. That's kind of, whatever it is that I guess I want to say, whatever the flavor of the day is with what these things may or may not be when people are discussing it. I think it's many things, and it's a theory. That's all we really have is theories anyway, to begin with. But yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't able to watch the video, but however, I do have the trailer here. Would you like me to play that now? I can just do that. Okay, so here is the trailer to the film going right now.
What is this all about? Why are we being interacted with by this range of physical and non-physical intelligences.
My experiences started at a young age, and typically what people refer to as like the grey alien.
And his evidence speaks for itself.
The evidence that Peter was showing via his video footage of craft, of all different kinds of craft, it's almost like they are being told, it's time to come out because we're here.
Pete's genetics, they've been manipulated, and they're different than a normal human. This has been happening to him since he was a child.
When it got pretty serious was when I started seeing what I could term as like blue orbs coming into the house, floating around doing whatever they do.
Applying enhanced filters to the footage, grey with large heads, large dark eyes, almond-shaped, small nose and mouth.
We saw that this was indeed an alien in his house, and there wasn't just one though, there was basically a whole crew of them.
We know who's on the ships. Begs the question is, why is this not available to the public?
It's crazy, but it is what it is.
The one we know as Pete is not so much one individual. Of course, the data reflects somewhat of a rotation of beings that can and do go in and out of Pete's body. Frankly, he's described as being an experiment, being a multi-dimensional alien type experiment.
Wow. Hey, well, there's a lot to unpack right there, Peter. First of all, is it James the one that had the glasses?
No, that was John Vivanco.
Oh,
So
okay.
he's
So
got-
John,
yeah,
is John the one that works for the FBI?
He's worked for them in a think tank, so it's like they've outsourced a group of remote viewers. And I think back in the day that was to do with Homeland Security after 9/11. So it was to prevent looking at potential events. I don't know how much more I can say on that, but yeah.
Yeah. So are they? That's kind of just taking a little sidestep here. Are they still working with remote viewing? I mean, is that something that they occasionally?
They've been working with remote viewing. I even found out recently in the Australian military that soldiers are being trained with remote viewing before going out, and they're fully trained to go out. I had this told to me personally by two people.
See, I thought that was done with in the 70s when.
Well, you had Project Stargate to start off with, but what I was told was after it was revealed in I think it was mid-90s, don't quote me, what happened was then they started to outsource it, and then I think it started to go under the NSA. I can't say much more on that, but that's what I've personally been told by people that were part of it.
Yeah.
At that time anyway, yeah.
How about that? And the pictures that were in the trailer that look like, aliens, gray aliens or whatever. Is that possible? Have you had someone? We have this thing that we call pareidolia, where we look at things and we make them into faces. And I don't know.
That's called matrixing. That's called matrixing, where you will matrix it. That's the term I've heard. I haven't heard that term, but yeah, I know it as matrixing. So the original photo is a lot clearer than that. The only reason you're seeing that version there is to enhance the contrast and everything, to bring it out so people don't have to look for it.
I see. Yeah.
But there is nothing that was there. I can tell you that 100% without a doubt. Like, meaning there's nothing there that could matrix that in the mind to see that image. Plus, the other one is a video of it blinking.
A video?
So,
what? Sorry.
There's a video in that movie, and it's already been on YouTube since 2017. There's a video of a grey head popping out that you can see the eyes blink.
Ah, wow! And that's on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's been up for years.
I missed that one. I looked at a few of them in the past, but I did miss that one in particular. But so these things, I don't know. First of all, there was one other thing I want to talk about that trailer, and that is your genetics have changed. Is that what I heard?
Yeah. So there's been up to 40 remote viewers work with John on about who I am and some of the experiences. Totally blind. And that's what they've all come up with, as well as there is some anomalous stuff as well.
Oh, but you haven't been tested to see if you're.
Well, what I can tell you is my creatine levels are extremely high, very similar readings to what we could see with UFO hunters with Terrell and Michael Lee Hill. My eyesight, I should have been wearing glasses full time in my 20s for the rest of my life, and I don't need glasses anymore. There's a few, I would go into more, but there's just things that I need to keep somewhat privacy for myself.
Huh, how about that? So, okay, so let's rewind for the person that hasn't heard. It's been a long time since you've been on this show. And so let's go back to the beginning of how these things began with you. How long ago? Can you talk about where you were living and all of that, if you would?
Yeah, so I'm from a town called Albury. It's on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. Together, they're known as Twin Cities, Albury, Wodonga, but I was on the New South Wales side. What I can say, there was experiences at a young age which I don't talk about because they're not 100% sort of, they're very vague, just imagery. But the way I describe it, and I talked about this in later years, never at the start, but there was forms of what I could say is telepathy, which I understand now, I didn't back then, from the age of 7. And this was a female energy or a voice speaking to me that would be telling me things before they happen, things to do with the family, sometimes with different events. I can remember going to the doctors with my mother one time about it, and the doctor said, well, it's nothing negative, so don't worry about it. So it was sort of just blow it off, but what he's saying was happening, or it would eventually happen. It was between the ages of 8 and 12 with strong memories of what I could describe as sometimes a grey alien or aliens, but they weren't grey, they were white. They would have skin that if you got cigarette ash and you dabbed it with your finger, that texture, it was like that, and they were white. Pure black armoured eyes, but they were more sort of, they weren't as up, they were sort of more like ours, but they were still on a tilt, not super big. And there was a recurring experience with them on a regular basis between the ages of 8 and 12. I remember that because I was living with my mother at the time in a certain new house that they had built. And then I went to my father's later on. So that was a recurring experience. It wasn't until...
Can I just interrupt you right there? Did you feel like you were what people are calling abducted?
No. I didn't think they were aliens. I didn't think they were angels, demons. I didn't know what they were. I had no reference for it. Mm-hmm. It scared the crap out of me too. At times I'd pull the sheet up, I can remember, and turning, and sometimes there'd be light coming from the peripheral of the curtain. Now, whether the sun was up in the morning, whether it was the middle of the morning and there was a craft outside, what was responsible for that, I've got no idea. All I can tell you is I was like, what the hell am I saying? What I haven't spoken about only a couple of times with Whitley Strieber and others was what I originally saw was something appearing as Kurt Cobain. I'm not saying it was Kurt Cobain, the singer of Nirvana, but I was into Nirvana. And looking back, I feel that they were projecting that image to try and wean me into it, but it actually scared the crap out of me more than what they looked like in their original state. So that's the weird phenomena with, you know, how this works. And there's a lot of stuff I've said on over the years, just because some of it's strangely enough so far out, besides what we're talking about with the topic, but this is the stuff that needs to be spoken about. And before I go further, what I have to say is to understand or to start to understand this phenomenon, I don't think anyone does 100%. You have to throw linear thinking out the window. 100% linear thinking has to go completely out the window. It doesn't mean don't be discerning and don't use logic at times, but you have to look at things in a way of 360-degree, unboundedly, all possibility to start getting to this, because a lot of the researchers, they've had a strange experience themselves, but what happens is it's ridiculed and it's looked down upon the really strange stuff. And when you get to know experiences like I have, I've spoke to thousands now, you find these common, weird, high strangeness things that they'll go, all right, I haven't told anyone this part of the experience. And then they tell you, and you find these sort of repeated patterns of very strange things. But with that said, my first UFO sighting was at the age of 12. And that was also in Albury, but it was in Lavington. It was a suburb where we were, Lavington. And I remember it was a hot day in summer, from what I can remember. And I had one of the slush puppies? It was a bottle I had where if you put the slush puppy into it, the bottle would change colors. So it was like one that you kept and you watched at home and you'd take it back to fill up. So I can remember walking down to the gas, you call it the gas station. And this gas station was known as Finco at the time, of road pantries, on the corner of Dick Road and the Hume Highway, which is like the main, at the time it would cut through Albury. It's the main sort of freeway or highway between Melbourne and Sydney. So a major road or highway. But I was on the side road to that, walking up to the gas station, and what I saw slightly, it would have been probably to the north or slightly northeast, was the only way I can describe this. It looked like if you pulled a weight off the end of a bar, put it sideways, like the actual weight itself, like a disc, but it wasn't, it was more like a weight. So it was curvature perfect on the sides, but this thing was a matte grey, broad daylight, 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. And it was 3 times the size of a football field, because I saw it in later years. And looking at things when you're young, when you get older, they look different in size. This craft is absolutely gigantic. And all it did was cut in front of this hill called Red Light Hill until it went away in the distance and I couldn't see it anymore. And to this day, I've not heard anyone else talk about seeing that in the town. But there was other UFO sightings around that time later that I found out about.
Wow.
So that was the starting phase of what we could say my introduction to this phenomena.
And when you have seen these, I just looked, Albury is, it's like 47,000 people. I don't know how many there were when you were young that lived
Probably
there.
about 20, give or take.
Yeah, it's fairly populated. Were you right in the downtown area? Were you on the outskirts? Or
if you look up Lavington on a map, it's sort of just north of Albury, so it's like an outer suburb of Albury, and then you go into the Hume and areas like that. Which, funny enough, when I was on the news years ago and my story started coming out here publicly, I had truck drivers and a lot of people from Albury, teachers, contacting me saying that they've seen similar stuff in the areas where I was reporting it as well. I even in later years, which we'll get to, I even contacted the air services, which is like your FAA, about these sightings, that I had the footage, I had witnesses, and I was just asking if there was anything in the skies at that time. And they told me back then that the Albury Airport was shut, I think, at that time. Don't quote me, but I believe, if I remember correctly, 6:30 at night onwards, because it was such a small town. And these things were happening after that, at that time, and they said nothing was in your airspace at that time. When I reported the site, there was 2 or 3 sightings I reported to them within a month, which is when all this started getting pretty full on in October of 2010.
wow. So yeah, I was wondering, I just heard you say it, that you've had, there are some cases that do have some witnesses. And what type of witnesses have you had over the years that can corroborate the different things that you've seen?
Neighbors, family, friends. When I was in Melbourne, I've actually got a sanctuary now where I'm out near Albury. I'm not in Albury. I'm about 40 minutes away. But what I can tell you, I've aerospace engineers. That's like pretty recent in the last few years. Just people that I meet. It's just, I've had over 300 people in my home that have experienced this, let alone a few thousand around the world when I've held skywatching events and things like that, whether in America or Italy or Mexico, wherever I've been, especially in America.
Well, I wanted to see if I could play one of these things. I can share one of these videos that I'm just taking right now from your, let's see if I can do that. I'm going to try to share a screen and pull up your video here. Let's see if I can get that to work. Looks like I sort of can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to play this video here. And I think we can talk over this. So this was recent.
Yeah, well, there's actually a couple of daytime ones that you might want to show that are a lot better quality with the 4K camera. This is with the Psionics Color Night Shot camera. You can't see the way that this thing maneuvers and goes away, and it did blink out, and I didn't capture that part because I'm filming this stuff on a regular basis, and sometimes you just want to enjoy the experience. So There's a good daytime one, which actually Whitley Strieber was going on about recently, where that was very similar to a sighting, I think, back in 2004, that he was gobsmacked with the quality and the similarity to another sighting. So this is nighttime, daytime phenomena. It really doesn't matter. But this is recent, as you can see, the 22nd of October.
Right, right. And I'll try to search for what you're talking about and see if I can pull that up.
Can I send you it in the link? I can send that just to you straight away from the YouTube in the link if you
actually
like.
You can just pull it up and share your screen. You'll see right on the bottom of your screen there, it'll say share screen. You can actually share the video if you want to try to figure that out as we go along.
Yeah, so I've got it here now if you want to see it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think all I have to do is let's see. Go ahead and try to bring it in. Do share screen and I'll okay it. Anyway, we're kind of working this tech stuff on the fly here. I do have to ask you if are you not able to pull that up right now?
No, for some reason it's asking me to go into settings and do a heap of different things. I can just send it to you. It's just called UFO of Australia, October 2nd, 2021. So yeah.
Oh, 2020, October 22nd, 2021?
Yep.
I thought that's
No, it's October 2nd. October 2nd.
All right. Okay. So I'll look for that while we're talking. But have you ever wondered why? You must have wondered why are you seeing all these things? Or is it just where you live? What is it that's going on there?
I think this stuff's going on everywhere. I think from the evidence over time and my experiences that I'm open to these types of things. And I think there's these types of people out there. I think anyone can experience it. But the way I describe it is we don't see with our eyes and we don't see with our pineal gland. Our eyes only pick up a fraction of 0.005% of physical matter, which is the visible light spectrum. We've got infrared, UV, gamma rays, what have you. And I think this stuff can be seen at any time, but some people are more receptive than others. And again, it doesn't matter what country I'm in. I see this all around the world. There is stuff that I could go into, but this is where it gets really deep in terms of, like I say, the ET phenomena is not even 5% of what this is really a part of, in my opinion. And this goes into other aspects, higher aspects of our consciousness, other aspects of who and what we all are individually and part of a collective as well. So that this is where it does get pretty laid. Yeah, this is the video here.
I'm going to run it now for everyone to see. And I will link these things in the show notes for those of you that are listening to just the audio podcast. So I'm assuming we'll see something. There it is. Okay. I see it now. So what were you using for equipment right there?
Oh, usually I just use a Panasonic 4K camera. I think this one's, I've had a couple over the years. I think this one's got the 30 times zoom, but it does go up to, that's optical zoom, and then it goes up to 1500 digital zoom. So yeah, I'm using that, or I'm using a Sony A7S II sometimes for the night stuff, or the psionics as well. So the Sony A7 is a really good camera. It's what a lot of the TV crews use for night stuff, like Ancient Aliens. When I was on Ancient Aliens and we filmed the craft, they were using that type of camera as well.
Yeah, and so that's it for that one. Well, that was definitely interesting, and you've had so many of these things over the years. I just think it's uncanny. I remember, back when you were on the first time, you had many. And what about pictures? You've taken pictures too over the years, haven't you?
Yeah, sometimes, like with the alien photo in the trailer, I didn't see anything at the time, but what happened was there was footsteps on the roof while I was in my cabin. Then I could hear something go from that to outside the lounge room window. I went outside and took that photo. There is some photos that if you go to my YouTube page again and go down to investigations, I think it's the first video on the home page, you'll see one of the clearest photos ever of a disc. And that was analysed by Jason Gleaves straight away. So there's many photos. I could say that there's over 3,000 photos and videos. A lot of it I haven't produced. A lot of it's been up and I've pulled down because I'm reintroducing a lot of stuff to present with analyzations that Jason Gleaves has done so much work for me over, I think, a 4-year period of analysing it. It's been analysed by Jaime Maussan's group, Terza Millennia, Japanese TV. They did a featured piece. Even here with the news and that, they've all been handed the original data and seen the metadata, and they've just got the raw footage as well over the years. But this is the point now. I'm over it. I don't care. It doesn't change anything. I'm somebody that's telling a story, and I think no matter how much stuff I've got and how much people see with me, people are going to believe, people aren't going to believe. And I think, unfortunately, this community has become more an entertainment industry. And that's why I'm shifting away from it and going more into the spiritual consciousness connection. Because if we look at J.L.N. Hynek, Jacques Vallée, great work, not putting them down. I admire what they've done. But the same theories that they've had since then stand now. Nothing's evolved in this community. Nothing. The technology might have got better for analysation, but people are sticking with what they can prove and what they can't prove, and they entwine their own, we could say, view of the lens of the world into that. And this is where it's getting nowhere. Same with the disclosure stuff. Great work, Dr. Greer, Stephen Bassett, many others have done, not putting it down. But what we're seeing is a controlled narrative. And I've talked to people in military, even with the latest footage. I know that the camera footage that we're being given, the FLIR imagery, is downgraded, then handed out, and that there's another 2 cameras on those planes that are actually filming our crafts. Only one craft, will I say, is extraterrestrial, and that is the Tic Tac UFO. Everything else is our stuff, whether it's got the navigation lights on it, whether they've distorted the footage and you can see that it's doing stuff that not extraterrestrial vehicles will do, because I've seen so many now and I'm interacting with these beings and I know who some of them are. I don't know everything, but what I can tell you is I know a lot more than most, but it's only 1% out of 1 trillion % of what I would know. But I don't see this going anywhere from where it has. If we go back to the old school researchers, we seem to be on a loop. And that's because nobody's making moves. We can talk about all this all we want, but this is where now we've got to get into the nitty gritty of consciousness. And I think work like Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, people that are doing stuff that we've thought was a load of crap or fairy tale for years, and now they're able to come in and measure people's consciousness and their heart and their energy and things like that. And it's because a lot of researchers don't want to go there because it sounds airy-fairy. Well, this is how a lot of the crafts are piloted. They're piloted through consciousness. And this is what they've been doing in the projects. And I can even remember hearing years ago David Adair talking about a situation. He's a famous American rocket scientist where he was part of a university thing where he had to go in because they're shooting the missiles in the fighter jets through thought wearing a helmet. And this bloke had come home, this pilot, found his wife sleeping with another man, went back to work, and because he was frustrated, it was shooting through thought, and he wasn't even trying to do it, so they had to put a block on it. So this is stuff that's been worked on for many years, but it's all got to do with consciousness. And no matter how many photos or videos I show and other people show, that's all child's play for what this is about. It's repeated, and this is what I say to people: what's the fruit of the information? Is it benefiting you? Is it helping your life? Or is it just entertainment for you? Because if that's just entertainment, you might as well just be watching a TV show about this, because I've been shot at over this. I've had stuff stolen from me. I've been in situations that I don't wish upon anybody. And this stuff is a very serious topic and life that I'm living, among many others in this community that have gone through similar things, that this is the stuff that people don't see behind the scenes. And this is a serious topic, and it's not to be taken lightly or just for armchair researchers to just be flicking through things.
Well, I've heard a number of people talk about this consciousness thing over the years, but I need it explained to me better. I don't understand exactly what it means. Can you break it down to make it so someone like myself and maybe my listeners can understand what you think that this consciousness connection or something that we're doing, how that works?
All right, so this is where, again, like I said at the start, to understand where I'm at these days, you have to throw linear thinking out the window. Again, it doesn't mean don't be discerning. But when we're talking about this, consciousness is awareness. Now, I could say right now, close your eyes, shut your senses off, and think about how you're perceiving and observing my voice. This is where it leads into meditation and consciousness states, because what I can tell you is when I'm filming a lot of those crafts, I'm on the crafts interfacing in my mind's eye, my pineal gland where people have dreams, with my eyes open, filming the craft, and I'm on the craft with the beings. Now, this is where a lot of people will not say stuff like that because that goes, all right, this guy's just lost me. And why have I lost them? Because I haven't experienced. So one thing is, I can explain this to you, but you aren't going to get it unless you've had an experience at that depth that's opened you full wide open to something like that, to where it seems to be an ongoing thing. Because once you open up like that, you never get shut down. But what's happening is, the way I describe this is, imagine your human body as a biological computer. Your consciousness, your soul, is the software operating that. And that interfaces, let's say, with God, source, creator, whatever you want to term it. And I'm going to go there because this is where it goes. This is where it goes with many experiences. So many experiences go into this kicking and screaming, and they eventually get there. All of them. And that's what I'll say. Some of them don't want to admit that because they lose people. But what's happening is, your body interfaces, or it's connected with your soul. Your soul interfaces with the unified field, God, source, creator, which we could say is the wireless internet. Now, this is where, the way I can explain it is that everything is a cell of one consciousness that encompasses all consciousness. That through thought, this is why I say to people, be very careful of what you say, what you do, and what you think, especially when you think about this phenomena, because so many people, they think about it, want to experience something, and then they experience something. And what's happening is, your brain decodes, like I was saying before, about the fraction of 0.005% of physical matter. Science, you can look it up. That's what we perceive, which is the visible light spectrum. Now, if your brain can't decode it or isn't open to it, you are not going to experience what I'm talking about. It is not going to happen, because you need to be open to the possibility first for the brain to be open to experience it. So this is why so many times I'll have somebody with me, they can't see the craft. But yet I go, look at the viewfinder. They can see the craft, then they look back up and now they can see the craft because they didn't know what to expect. It wasn't what they were expecting in some cases. So when we look at consciousness, consciousness is how we perceive this world. It's the awareness. And that's the point from that state that even these beings are operating in. These beings are no better than us. Some of them might appear to be more technologically advanced, but they're all trying to go through their own conscious evolution. Their own civilizations are still trying to develop as well. So this is where we could say with this again, the paranormal's included, because what's happening is, I'll give you an example of consciousness and how it interfaces with these beings. You have a thought, like somebody has a UFO sighting, and I'll ask them a question. As an example, this has happened numerous times. Did you just think you had to go outside and check the mail, or was the car, check if the car was locked? I'm just giving an analogy here. They're going, yeah, I thought I'd go and check the mail, go outside. And when I went outside, check the mailbox, I looked up and there it was. That thought, the seed of that thought to go outside and check the mailbox, that was actually what I call thought transfer, commonly known as telepathy. It was a thought projected to the subject. They think to go outside, because if they're just going to get a thought, go outside, look up in the sky, there's a UFO there, they're not going to digest that. It's something that's got to be through their own thought. So these beings communicate through thought. So what's happening with me, for example, I'm getting thoughts, I'm getting visions with my eyes open, and I'm getting feelings and emotions to everything that they're projecting to me conscious-wise of what they're trying to communicate. It's literally like shoving a USB stick into your brain, data transfer going on. It's just flickers of stuff, and you're coherent, you're with it, you've got everything. But sometimes what's happening is the body computer's got to catch up for you to fully articulate the information. And what I can tell you now is that most of the interfacing that's going on with the consciousness aspect has got to do about who I am, and I'm not special. I find with all experiences is twofold. One aspect is about who and what they truly are. And the second aspect is about playing their part the best that they can to be a part of the awakening, healing, and uplifting of human consciousness. That's what we find across the board. Now, it's not to say all these beings are positives. I can tell you they're not all positive. There's a small fraction, which I would probably say is around 5% of my interactions have been extremely negative. And then there's other beings that it's not positive or negative. Well, I could even say it's a trickster type energy where there is no substance to the communication or the experience, except it's just an experience. And then the rest of it, what I would say is there is a transfer of euphoric bliss, enlightenment, a knowingness and a remembrance of the intelligence that I'm interacting with. And that's what it was in years later. Now it's different. It's more like they're friends because that's what it is. But this is where it comes into us having multiple lenses in multiple realms, experiencing things from a higher state of consciousness. And like I'll say, if you really delve into most contact cases which are ongoing that I've spoken to a lot of these people, they're telling me the same information I've got, but from a different angle, adding to what I've got. And when you start putting it together, there's either a huge hoax going on, I say to people, or there's something to it. That's the bottom line of it. That I've spoken to people in the Air Force, in America, here, and the thing that we're at now is they say, that I think the population can handle that there's an extraterrestrial presence at times. But what they can't handle maybe at this time is that some of these beings are living right next to us and we can't perceive them. They're living in the earth. And some of them are from completely different realms that aren't got anything to do with planets or stars the way that we know it. And that is the part that they probably can't integrate yet, because they've got to yet integrate there's extraterrestrials and they're not going to get the conscious aspect like you were saying. It's a big leap to go there. But this is where it leads. Whether people want to go kicking or screaming or not, that's where it goes.
Well, it's I would, it's pretty far out there, but I got to tell you this, that I heard, you mentioned, the videos and things like that. And I've heard, different things about people's opinions on those videos. But I heard Lou Elizondo, who is supposed to be on this show in a few weeks, but unfortunately he's not. He's not going to be on until March. But he said on another podcast that what if what we're encountering, or some of what we're encountering, is something that is on a different level than, now this is, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines with, what if we're not the top of the food chain here on this planet? What if something right next to us is above us? And so he was saying something almost in a way similar to what you were saying. And I do understand what you're talking about. I've talked about it many times, about the spectrum that we actually see. We only know a very small part of what is actually going on around us. Does that mean that things have to be multidimensional to be crossing through?
Everything's crossing through. And the way I describe it, right, is these experiences, right, what's happening is the human brain can't process a lot of it. Again, it comes back to what I was saying, linear thinking. How we communicate with the world predominantly is through the five sense reality: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. But there's other components here. There's the mind's eye. There's thought transfer. There's feelings and emotions. And that's what you've got to include with those. And we've been shut down from that. We've been shut down. It's been in process for thousands of years to shut it down. You're born into the world. You get vaccinated. You go to primary school. You're told what to wear when you start going to school. Well, here in Australia, you do anyway. You've got to wear certain uniforms. You're told when you can go to the toilet. You go and get a job. You've got to go and pay a mortgage, or you've got to go to university. You're told and you're programmed. What that has done has shut us down and kept us in a five sense reality to where our emotions, our imagination is fairy tale. But what I can tell you is imagination is not fairy tale. They can meet you in the realm of imagination, the mind's eye, that dream state, which happens to me in a waking state. Now, I'll give you an example of this, where what's happening is again, thoughts, feelings, and visions coming in when I'm interfacing with them. I can project thoughts back and forth. It took me years to develop that with them. But what I'm doing is I'm communicating through thoughts, feelings, visions, all the stuff that we're told that's fairy tale. It's not part of the 5 sense reality, so it don't exist. And so this is where we need to develop that as a species individually. If people don't want to do it, that's fine. But it's developed naturally through me. This is why people develop it naturally through meditation. They can go into altered states of consciousness. So we've got this aspect that what I can tell you is, and it wasn't on Ancient Aliens, but there's witnesses to this, James Gilliland and myself independently, and John Vivanco, as a remote viewer, he did it. We all predicted the time and the location a craft would rock up at ECD Ranch. It happened. Not only once, but we've done this over the years. There's times I will just walk out. I'll be with friends and family. I'll go, there's a craft outside. And I'll be like, you haven't even gone outside. We walk out, look up. There's a craft broad daylight sitting there above the house. So repeatedly, myself and others have said what time, what location. They had, for example, with Ancient Aliens, there was flight apps, there was satellite trackers. These things were disappearing, reappearing on demand. When we said, now this is where that's been repeated more than 3 times by me. That's been probably repeated over 100 times by me. That's science, isn't it? You repeat it, you do it 3 times, you have witnesses, you get them to test it out. This isn't what's being looked at now. And it's because there's a controlled narrative within the UFO community and within the governments to set things to a certain state. And we want it to be to this agenda, and this is where it's going. Now, this gets into conspiracies and other things. But if we look even over the last few years, how many conspiracy theories have ended up being conspiracy fact? This gets really deep. And that's why we are out of time as a human species to go to this next level. We need to start opening up and start getting out of just operating in the 5 sense reality and looking at things in black and white, because the answers, a lot of them I don't have. They're in the grey area between the white and the black. That's the problem. And everyone wants it this way, or they want it this way, or they expect it this way, they expect it that way. Once you give in and surrender and just be the observer, that's where stuff will start to come. And that's why we're on this loop within the UFO community.
Why would we're going to be going into a break in about 6 minutes here, but why would these things appear in the sky? What makes the sky the place where they want to appear?
They don't just appear in the sky. I think some of it's a safety thing. Some of it's because they can feel your energy. And if you're too freaked out, it actually is like John Vivanco says, it's like throwing a brick at them. And he's right. There's been dark energies when I've shown them love and compassion, they've actually turned into smoke and dissolved. So this is where I'm not saying most of it's in the sky. Most of it's actually happening right in front of me. Just half of the time, I'm not thinking about getting a camera out and filming it because you're experiencing it. But what I can say is I've got a lot more than most in the community to be able to provide, whether it's orbs, whether it's apparitions, whatever it is that's appearing down low. Because like I said, they can land a craft on you. So a lot of people in bed, when I've talked to them about their experiences, they finally get it, where they'll have a hum, there'll be a sensation. I spoke to Native American elders about this, and Aboriginal elders hear about this, where sometimes you're not going to another planet or you're not going into space. If you can imagine an ET vehicle, let's just say a flying saucer for a moment, and I've got this actually on video at the ECD Ranch of a cigar craft 3 foot off the ground. Imagine an ET vehicle as an apparition. As a ghost, you can see through it. It looks a bit smoky, but you can definitely see definition to it, depth, what have you. They can land that on you. It can go through your home, land on you, and be overlapping different rooms. And if your eyes are closed and if you're in touch enough, you'll actually start to see vision. Sometimes you might see a light. So what they can do in that state is they can put you physically on board the craft that way, or you can just have a mind's eye experience where you can see it like as if you're laying down in the craft and you can see the beings. Or your light body can be pulled out of the physical vessel and you can experience it from what we could say an unbounded state of consciousness in board the craft. This is how, what I'll tell you, most experiences are happening that way. And because
so you're talking what people formerly called abductions?
Well, not just abductions. Very small amount of my stuff's abductions. I think in some cases they think it's abductions, but they don't. All right. what I can tell you is, and maybe think about this for your own research, so many times people will start out calling them abductions, and then 10 years later, they're not abductions anymore. It's an experience.
Right. Yeah. Experiencers.
They're just not understanding it at the time. And again, there's a point on that might not make that right. What did I tell you at the start? I used to freak out. Scared the absolute living crap out of me to where I'll pull the sheets up and turn around because I didn't know what the hell it was that I was experiencing. I didn't know what it was. Again, I didn't think it was alien, demonic, angelic. I had no idea what it was. So this is where, if this isn't talked about and put on the plate, people experience it and they fob it off. But there is more and more people, more than ever, talking about it in a way that I'm talking about it, or from a different perspective, that this is where it lies. And I believe everyone's an experiencer, but because they're not taking notice of their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, and sometimes those things are guiding them in a certain way, and then it turns out to be right, they just fob it off as a coincidence. But there gets to a point where it starts getting beyond a coincidence, and we start seeing synchronicities which lead on to other things.
Well, I had, one real solid UFO sighting, and that's it. And so I wonder how that works in your thoughts. Like, shouldn't I have more because I had that one? And then another question, we're going to be just about out of time here. But another question is, what about mass sightings? When, say, all these people, let's just say the Phoenix Lights for one, all these people were outside looking up at a comet. And then they saw this craft go over lots and lots and lots of people. So, and I don't know, did some people see it and standing next to people that didn't see it? Were these...
I would say there's probably some people that will look. I haven't got an answer for that. I've got theories about that. There would have been some people that were there during those sightings that just probably didn't see a thing, or they weren't perceiving it as something anomalous. 100%. With you having a sighting and never having it, you haven't had a sighting since?
Right. Well, yeah. I had what I thought was one, but I don't, turns out it was probably not. Yeah.
I think these things just happen. Sometimes people just experience it. Sometimes, I think whatever happens is meant to be, but sometimes people just have an experience and that's it. That's what it is. It's like, it's life-changing because you've seen something that defies the physics and law of things that you know. But some people, if they experience it and they're not opening up enough and that was part of their journey, that's what they'll experience. Sometimes that's all you're meant to experience. Like, this is where I say, you're asking me a question that might be yes or no, but I've got to tell you again, the answers are sitting in the grey area, which are, there's many sort of ways you could look at this and theorize about it. All I know is what's happening for me and what seems to be common from the research and the researchers that I've been working with.
Yeah. Very good. Well, we're ready to go in the break. So if you're over at KGRA Radio, we'll be back in 3 minutes. And if you're watching live right now, we will be going into a 3-minute music break, and we'll be back right after that. All right, we're back. By the way, all music that is played here on the show is by Kerry Lloyd Whitehouse. He lives in Ireland. He makes music for movies. That one sounded like it came out of a movie somehow. My guest today is Peter Maxwell Slattery, and I'm bringing him right back in. Peter, one of the things you said that it really hit home, just because it was just last week. I played a clip from a woman that I met out in Phoenix recently, where she was only 14 years old when she had the sighting back in 1973. And that video is up on my YouTube channel. And she said that she was compelled to look up over her shoulder. And there it was, like something made her look over her shoulder. It wasn't, she felt like she had to do it. Maybe I'm putting words in her mouth, but that's what she was getting at when she said that. And by the way, before I move on from that, I have a lot of people have emailed me, wow, she was great. Why did you have her on such a short time? Well, I have people on for real short clips so I can put them on during commercial breaks. But she will be back on. A lot of people have asked if she can be on and talk about it more. So she will be a guest on the show at some point next year. But anyway, the compelling part, that's not the first time I've heard that. I know someone that's had a lot of sightings and filmed a lot of sightings, that he said the same thing. Like he just knew that he had to look out the window of the jet airplane at that certain time, and there this thing was, and he filmed it. So it's pretty compelling.
It's just hard, because if you tell that to somebody, because again, this community's been trying to keep it nuts and bolts. And don't get me wrong, we need the nuts and bolts component just as much as we need the consciousness component, looking at things from that way. But it's repeated, like you said, you've mentioned a few people, and that's the part that I'm trying to say is the communication. But because you can't see, touch, taste, smell anyone or see them physically, we're doubting it. But that's the way that telepathy works. It's the way that psychics work. It's the way that remote viewers work, though they work in a different way that they'll articulate and get the information out. But it's a very, I think it's worthwhile for very in-depth investigation and even more studies in that realm of, we could say, intuition, psychic development, what I call thought transfer, because not only is it how I see it as the main mechanism with most of these other races or beings, but also it can work with spirits, ghosts. It could work with what we say other types of phenomena that are out there as well. I believe that is the main mechanism that the communication is done universally. It's not through mass, though. Mass, we could say, with geometry and things like that it's a part of universal language mathematics is, but this is taking it to an entire new way that can't be, I guess, as tangible as we'd like it to be, something that we can get on paper.
Yeah, so there is that problem of, I guess we've been, I don't know if you want to use the word fighting, we've been trying to get evidence, people in the UFO community that take it seriously. And I'm sure the government too, our government, maybe your government, who knows, would love to have like real evidence of these things. There's rumors about evidence and all that, but how could there be any evidence of this whole thing, of what you're saying?
Well, like I said, repeatable times, not just myself, but James Gilliland, I could probably name 10 other people that I know that know when the crafts are there, what time, location, what they're going to do. And then you go there and you film it and it happens. That's repeatable. That's the form of science. Just because they can't get onto the object and interface with the object themselves, I'll doubt it. But how isn't it beyond a coincidence that I might say a date, time, location, then the craft appears and I've repeated it? Isn't that science as well? It might not be in the way, again, that you can test the materials, you can talk to the beings and whatnot, but usually you've got an aim, method, and conclusion. The aim, crafts, let's say a method, the communication, conclusion is it actually happens and it's repeatable.
Well, it's also elusive at the same time. You say it's repeatable, but and perhaps it is, but That's been the problem all along, is that it's not something that, you mentioned a couple of times that you can go out and whatever it is right there or whatever. And I have heard that before, but you can't really, no one really knows when these things are going to show up, basically.
In other cases, no, and sometimes I don't as well, but sometimes you do. So we could say it's almost like a tornado. They're trying to use science for that in some ways, that they can predict it within 15 minutes. But other times you get these freak F5s that come out of absolutely nowhere in an area that they weren't expecting, and it does a lot of damage. So this is where it's a continuous thing in work. Again, I don't have all the answers, but what I am telling you, and I think it needs to just start to be noticed by the community, is that this does have a consciousness awareness aspect to it. And unfortunately, a lot of people like me who've been speaking about this since I've been born have got a lot of crap for it, but it's where it eventually leads everyone.
Interesting. I have a clip here. I'm going to try to play it, and I would like for you to tell me if you hear the audio once this starts. I'm not sure if it's going to be set up for it or not, but tell me if you hear the audio.
I can just hear it.
But a brave man who simply made a choice to operate on his personal convictions based on the evidence.
So why I'm playing this is
later, John and Dominique came to the scene to work with the children,
is here.
their parents, and the teachers still suffering from shock. John, who essentially specialized in child psychiatry, devoted a great deal of time to interviewing the children. Something scared you, is that right?
Yes.
What scared you?
The noise.
What noise?
The noise that we heard in the air.
You heard a noise in the air? What was it like? Like a roar or a buzz or a hum, or what kind of a noise?
It was like someone was blowing a flute. It was scaring myself.
It was scary because you saw something yourself?
Yes. I saw a little object hovering. It was quite big actually, and then there were little ones all around it. It was silver, and the ring around it was red.
Was red. Did light come from the whole thing, or
There were lights around it.
lights along the edge there? How many of the strange beings did you see?
I saw one over here. They had eyes like that, and they were kind of just like looking at us. They were like kind of astonished.
The eyes were like more pointed as they came in toward the center of the head, is that?
No, more circular, and this was all black.
All black. Now you made pupils. Did they actually have pupils or black?
The pupils were white like
You
that.
saw white in the center?
Yes, like that.
Was he near the silver object, or was he far?
No, on top.
On top of the silver object. Okay. And did you look at him?
Yes.
Did he look at you?
Yes, he gave me the creeps that I talked
Gave you
about.
the creeps. Actually, in your drawing, you showed him standing up, didn't you?
Yes, I had to draw him standing up because I couldn't draw him sitting. What I thought was maybe the world's going to end. Maybe they were telling us the world's going to end.
I can tell. I mean, I know this is something that a person wants me to believe, or they're frightened, or they're distorting reality in some way. There's nothing like that here. These are people of sound mind, by and large, telling me something that's they know that I might think they're crazy, and so they're a little concerned about telling me, and they're very full of questioning themselves and doubt, and I mean, and then they describe something very real and intense, a light or something happened to their body, or it's the whole quality of the way they talk about it is the way a person talks about the experience it.
So I wanted to play that because basically there's it kind of dovetails into what we're talking about. Now, these are young, impressionable children. This is the Ariel school incident back in 1994. To me, I think it's the most intriguing case of any of the cases myself. But there was some of these children saying they were getting messages, and a lot of the messages that they were saying they were getting had to do with taking care of this planet And so I guess the question, have you ever had any thoughts transferred or whatever you're talking about that are along those lines of taking care of this planet? Has that ever been part of it?
Yeah, I think not just that, but how we treat each other, what we do to the planet, how we could be more eco-friendly and self-sufficient in a way that's not so unproductive to Mother Earth and the environment and the things that we're doing. So this is a very this has been part of the messages, but you also see it's a common theme when I've talked to other people that there's been messages for them as well. And I think I'm glad you showed that. Mary Rodwell quotes John Mack in the movie. And I think for the people that, again, I don't want anyone watching this to believe me. I've got to say that to start off with. I think the problem that we've got is blind belief. That's what's got us in a predicament in all the areas that we need to work on is blind belief, whether it's religion, whether it's the government, whether it's politicians, whether it's whatever. I want people to investigate. And I think something great to start to get into what I'm talking about today would be somebody with an outstanding background like Professor John Mack, because he went into what I'm talking about from a psychological point of view of how these cannot be something that's made up. Of course, there's mentally ill people, and there's always an if. But when you look at this, and especially his case studies, you start to see that this has got substance to what the person has experienced. And I think that's something that, from a medical background standpoint, and even some of the ways that he's studied and researched this phenomena over the years, is a great footing for some people to get into the stuff that I'm talking about.
Right. I was really glad that he did get in there and interview those kids, within that short period of time. And so there are a lot of children that have sightings, a lot of schoolyard sightings. Preston Dennett wrote a book and came up with, I think it was 120 of them or something like that. And there's a lot more because I keep hearing about, people are contacting me. Oh yeah, that happened at my school. So would you think that in the thoughts that you're having of what's going on, that children are more open-minded or more impressionable? What would be the connection? Why there's so many of those?
I think there's a few aspects to it. I think the children these days are operating on a different bandwidth, highly intelligent in a lot of cases. They're seeing the world in a different way, but they're less programmed, like I was speaking about earlier. A lot of kids are defiant, not to be disrespectful. They just see practical, different ways of doing things that are more productive, and then they go about it. So whether it's a mixture of that mixed within, they're less what I call socially engineered because they're young. They're pretty much a blank slate and they're open to all possibility. And so they're less filtered through the lens that they're viewing this reality when there is something like this, if they experience this. Then you have the flip side that you've got some parents that are very spiritual and the kids can be influenced by that as well. And this is where I've worked with a lot of children over the years, and some children that I've met with the parents, very impressionable in terms of, that's their experience. And then sometimes you think, well, it might be a bit either way here because the parents are into the spiritual stuff and they talk about it in front of their children and they're watching YouTube on spiritual stuff and all that. So you wonder, are they influenced by that? Or is it really their own information that they're getting at the same time? So it's a bit of a mixed bag there. But I think you bringing up this topic, one great case that a lot of people are unaware of is Westall 66.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. 200 students, school teachers. I've even gone to the spot and there's still there's an impression from one of the crafts to this day in the Grange, at the back of the Grange area from where one of these crafts landed. That's a very intriguing case with 200 students and teachers that have experienced these two crafts from what I remember in broad daylight.
Right.
So then they were locked in a hall with American personnel and Australian, I think, military and personnel going there telling them that this did not happen. So, but at the same time, the same year, you had the inception of Pine Gap, which is a joint space facility between America and Australia, but really it had a CIA backing to it as well. And also I can't remember the Prime Minister's name. He went missing that year as well and was never found again. So you had a lot happen in 1966.
Wow, I'd never heard that part. Wow. Interesting. Yeah. I probably should have brought up that case instead of the Ariel school.
No,
but
no. Well,
just,
from what I know, I think there was one person at Westall that had interactions with the intelligence, and they actually went missing. They were taken away, not by the craft, but by military personnel, from what I remember. But
was it the young girl?
From what I remember, now I don't know if she was seen again in later years or if it was just for a short period of time. But I remember that one person that apparently touched the craft, they were whisked away, separated from the school. But the Zimbabwe case is very interesting because you've got multiple children telling the same story, and they're also describing not just the craft but the beings as well. So, and the messages as well. You know, you got the message component and the communication going on.
When I spoke with Selma Siddiq, who is one of the people she was right there. She said she was within 4 feet of the being. And she said that, I asked her to describe the being, the black eyes. She said the skin was white. She said almost looked like porcelain. She said the best way she could describe it is the skin looked like porcelain. And she also said that breaking eye contact with this being to go check on her siblings was one of the hardest things she ever did in her life, is to break away at that point. So I guess I'll ask you, have you had like these type of encounters? Do you think you've had these type of encounters?
I don't think I know. Just like I'm talking to you now.
And what is that? Are these verbal encounters, or is it all just things you can, are you communicating? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So what I will say is at the very early stages of this, there's 2 parts. It's thought, and the other component is there was at times, and still, it almost sounds like, so for anyone listening, if they're a musician or a guitarist especially, it works better on an acoustic guitar, but if you put your chin on the acoustic guitar and hit a string, you actually feel like it's vibrating into your into your head.
Yeah.
Right. So I've had it where I've had voices like that it's nothing to do with the eardrums, nothing to do with like me hearing an external voice. It's within me with the vibration that I would hear words with a neutral accent that would be in English. Other times, predominantly, is purely through thought, and the thoughts will have visions, and there'll be feelings associated with it. So very early on, that's how it was more like an acoustic at times. It wasn't very often at all. I feel that was more for me to be receptive because it was thoughts at times coming with it, but I wasn't understanding it. Like it took me years to understand when I'm getting the thought to go outside and look up the crafts there. It was actually communication. But because I wasn't having somebody stand in front of me saying, right, we've got a craft outside, and I didn't have an external source telling me, I was doubting the thoughts and the feelings that were being of the form of communication.
Well, let's just say this, that you have an encounter or whatever. I'm just trying to picture everything. Okay. So let's just say, if there is another dimension, does someone like you go into their dimension? And if so, are you scaring people like we would be scared of a ghost, or scaring people like a UFO or whatever?
There is that component, but this is where I'll say it's not black and white. There is other frequencies that the physical body can go to, very minimal. So what will happen sometimes is I might be taken physically or teleported or dematerialized and put somewhere else. And then my body can't go up further from that. So my body stays where it is and the consciousness goes out and it interfaces and goes up. It goes up to another frequency, to such a frequency where the body computer cannot operate. So there is an overlap of that can be happening. This is what we see with hauntings, for example, that sometimes you've got a residual haunting. Well, what's a residual haunting? A residual haunting is like an event playing over and over like a tape that no matter what you do, the event's going to happen. It might be you hear a voice at the same time every week and it's saying the same thing, but nothing's there, and you could record it with an electronic. It's a disembodied voice. An electronic voice phenomenon is where you don't hear it, but it's being recorded, but you actually hear this. So you can't interface with that, But then there's other hauntings you've got where you're actually able to interface, and even reports of where people are hearing an argument or an event happen that was actually them and their partner, let's say, but it could be from years ago, or it could be from in the future that's overlapping that space-time that they're experiencing. So this is why I say the paranormal, the UFO community, and the conscious community should actually be all working together, because they'll find that a lot of things are overlapping in different scenarios that are coming from different sources. So it's a yes, but it's also, but like I'm saying, it's you can't look at this topic in this situation with yes, no. There is so many different things that even one of the beings I'm interfacing with is another aspect of me that's not human, is from somewhere else. And I've talked to others, and there's been other reports of this as well, that they're interfacing with other aspects of their, what we could say, oversoul that's coming through, and you could betray it, and it may even be extraterrestrial, but it's operating out. It's another aspect offshooting from what we could say the same cell of your higher self, which is a cell of God's body, the way that it's been articulated to me.
You do probably realize that a lot of people are going to think this is like way out there compared to, a lot of the nuts and bolts UFOs that I talk about in this show. So we'll probably get a little bit of that for feedback, just so you're aware.
Yeah, I've been putting up with this for years, and that's why the community is going nowhere. It's not that I'm right, but what I'll tell you is people have a right for a difference of opinion. What I'm fed up with is people being ASS about it.
Yeah.
Right? They have no right to do that. This is a very important topic, and that's why when I see the comments and the way people put me down, that's why the world's the way it is. Doesn't mean you've got to agree with somebody, but when people are totally disrespectful, where it's not, I haven't been mean to them in any way, and I get hate mail, but I'll tell you what, I get just as much respect from this community than I do disrespect, and that's why it's getting nowhere, because of the way that we treat each other.
Yeah. Well, no matter what I do, I get the same mail, often, and criticized a lot. And but I just, advice from my son when I started this show years ago was take all the gratitude and all the criticism with the same grain of salt. Just be happy with what you're doing. And so I just keep plugging and happily celebrated 10 years of doing this, as I mentioned.
Yeah, congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it's another thought. Now, I will tell you that probably about 15 years, maybe 10 years prior to my UFO sighting, I had a poltergeist situation. I don't know what else to call it. Something was moving something. It happened. I witnessed it firsthand. It was scared the heck out of me because I was alone in a house, door slamming, a broom leaning up against the door after the door slams, all this weird stuff that happened. And I witnessed it firsthand. And for a long time, I didn't tell anyone. I thought no one would ever believe me. But so you're saying that it's possible that I encountered this and then later maybe I was open-minded enough. I don't feel like I wasn't expecting anything to happen, and it just happened.
Be in some cases, but I'm not saying in these cases like with you, but that is in some cases that could be the possibility that they've opened up to an experience, and then other things they start to experience, and it could take years. I know some experiences that will not talk about their experience, and as soon as they do, they might not talk about anything for 10 years, then they have another experience. So this is where these intelligences in some cases can pick up on your thought, on your intentions, and it's very acknowledgeable on their part, but we're not sort of understanding that. So whether that was the case, I can't say. But it is interesting how many people have had, we could say, UFO sighting, but also they've had a paranormal experience or vice versa over, it could be years span in between that amount of time.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pull up another video of yours I want to ask you about, and I'm going to share that. Again, I will link up things to, it's not letting me do that for some reason. Oh, maybe here it is. Okay. I will link things to this, to the show notes in this. This one in particular, what is the scoop on this one?
This was taken last year. I can't remember the exact date at the moment. There was actually 2 days of experiences where I had missing time at a pine forest where my cabin was at the time.
That's a picture. Yes.
That's a photo. That is a photo. I actually, sort of embarrassing to say this. I was in America and I bought this easy camera to keep on me from Walmart when I was in Washington State. I was actually at Hood River. And I charged it up. I hadn't used it for probably a year or so. But I thought I might start using this than the other cameras that I got because they're a bit bulkier, just to keep a camera on me. And that camera had no SD card in it, but it would take, I think, 2 or 3 photos without the card in it. So I would have got video or would have got more pics. But I was and it was 2 days in a row at the same time. The next day I totally forgot because I'm used to just having a card in my camera. And I remember telling John Vivanco and Jason Gleaves when I sent them the photo and James about this as well. And I was just angry at myself for not putting a friggin' card in that camera. But yeah, we wouldn't have those snaps if that camera didn't allow. I found out there is a function where some cameras will take 1, 2, 3 pics, but that's all they've got without an SD card, and that was taken.
Yeah. Oh, I'm king of doing things like that. You know,
when it happens with stuff like this, it's frustrating.
Yeah. I went to Phoenix and I had my camera, a video camera there, and I had a video card. Whoops. I don't know what I did here. Let's see. I don't know what, let me just see what happened here. Here we go. I'm not sure what exactly happened there, but anyway, I had everyone look through my bag to find this because I couldn't find it. It's a small card. It's, I don't know, maybe this big. It's like 3 by say 2 or 4 by 2, something like that. Anyway, we all looked through the bag. It wasn't there. I had to use my cam, my webcam on a tripod, and had someone, behind the camera doing it. That we made it happen, but I got back and I'm thinking, wonder where this thing is, looking all over my office. And then I look at the bag that I brought with me to Arizona, and there it is right there. I grab it right away, right in the bag. It was there all along and I never saw it. These things happen to me.
They happen. Yeah.
The
other flip side is I have another experience of something like that with a card happening, but different. I was in the same area about 3 or 4 years before that footage you saw there in the photo. And I actually had James Gilliland with me from America and a family member. And there was something it was an orb about the size of a 2-story house, probably about 30 foot off the ground. And I filmed it and it blinked out on it. So I had about 1.5 minutes worth of footage. And we're thinking, this is amazing footage. This is going to be epic. And I've gone to put it into the computer and nothing was on there. And I know it was recording, but nothing was on the card.
Yeah.
And that would have been amazing footage to be able to show. But that's, technology. Yeah. And sometimes it's the operator.
A lot of people have talked about filming UFOs and their camera didn't work or the battery died instantly. There's a lot of weird things going on. And speaking of weird, you mentioned that you've had some experiences that were not so good. I don't know if that's something you'd want to talk about.
I don't want to focus on it too much, but there has been entities. One entity I'll describe as what I call a reptilian grey. And this was an experience that was, the only way I could describe it is I went to bed one night and I used to sleep in this place that I had at the time I had these French horizontal blinds that I would leave slightly open so the street light would come in. So if I had to get up or anything was going on, I could just see. And as soon as I got into bed one night, there was an entity. Now, his head was slightly above my head when I'm laying down. So this thing had to have been short. And when what I first felt was like an energy where it felt like my heart was being pulled into my stomach, almost like a G-force from a roller coaster, if that's what you'd call it. That's what it felt like, but I was just sitting there. And when I opened up my eye, I could see an eye this big, this far from my head. And I've sort of taken a back by it. And I could see scales all over it, this massive eye. And it was the worst feeling. But then something kicked into my consciousness to where I felt sorry for this being, if this is how it felt or if it was generating that. And at that time, it was almost how I was responding. It now is responding that way. And I had the upper hand where I was calm. And the only way I can describe it is that this entity, it turned into smoke and just disappeared. Like a ghost, like that apparition sort of substance, whatever you want to call it, is what happened, and then it was gone. But the feeling was like the most dreaded feeling I've ever had.
Wow. Yeah, I have heard a few people say negative. I was on someone else's show recently, and they when I said it, the question always comes up. Of course, it's kind of what our topic is today. And what do you think they are? What are they? What do they want? That type of thing. And I mentioned something, well, whatever's going on, where it's not harmful. And they said, well, what about Brazil? And, there's been a lot of harmful things that have happened over the years. But for the most part, like I've always thought, whatever technology it is they have to get here, they could do a lot more harm than they're doing. So,
like I've said, if they wanted us gone, we wouldn't be here. Technology that some of these beings have. But I think there is almost a chain of evolution of consciousness that, in a way, the negative beings serve a purpose that I look at things consciously now in life. Now, what I've got to tell you, I'm still young. I'm 38 years old. A lot of people think I'm a lot older. I'm 38. I'm still a child in a way, in many ways. I'm not putting myself down, but what I can tell you is, having years to reflect on this is almost like, even in life when something negative happens to us, we either have an opportunity to learn and grow from it and not repeat that mistake if it was on our part, or put ourselves into a situation, or we can repeat it and we can. It's like Albert Einstein used to say, words to the effect of, you can't solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it, basically. But there is a point with the negative experiences, or what I call negative entities, demonic, archonic, what I call lower light, predominantly because they're void of light and they're distorted forms of energy. When I've experienced these energies at the hierarchy or echelon of this force, in my opinion, that it almost shows you how you don't want to be, or how you don't want to experience things. So it shows you what you don't want, and then you can focus on what you do want. It almost gives you an experience to raise your level, so you reach a higher state to where these things can no longer affect you. It's something that took many years to have that insight and guidance. And Mary Rodwell said something to me very interesting years ago, which was, she said, Pete, if there's a parasitic weed and it sucks the life off of a tree, is the weed really that bad if the only way it can exist is by doing that? So it's like a cup half empty, cup half full. It depends on one's perspective and the way that we want to perceive and look at things in life.
So the connections that you feel like you've had with whatever it is that they are they looking to connect here? Are they purposely looking to connect? Or is it just haphazardly connect?
Well, some of the ones that are interacting with me is purposely to connect with me. Sometimes it isn't the case. But when we look at agendas and how this unfolds, I used this on another analogy with another podcast recently with agendas. What I'll say to you is, just imagine you're in a car and you're on the outskirts and you can see the city of Los Angeles in the distance. What's the agenda and motive of every person in the city? It's going to be different. Same thing out there.
And is it out there? I mean, are these, we're not sharing the planet with these things, or are we? Or do they pop in and out of? I mean, I'm just trying to picture the whole theory here.
So to get into that, and it's not to plug my books, but I've got 5 books that delve into this. I've got 7 out. 5 books that delve into this, that it is so convoluted that it would take many 2-hour conversations just to cover the groundwork. But what I can tell you is, there are some ancient civilizations that still reside here, inside certain areas where they've got, you'd call them bases, but really they're just ancient remnant, or we'd call them ancient civilizations, but they've got facilities within certain mountains and places. There are beings that are coming back from the future. There are beings from other star systems and other galaxies and even other complete different universes. And there is predominantly what I call the 90%, the 90% of realms that don't have planets and stars. When I started having these experiences, it was more of a physical thing. And it's a very small percentage now, physical thing. It used to be a lot. People had seen Shiji, one of the beings I interact with, and other beings. But then there was this period years ago where I started to go through these experiences where I was taken into higher states of consciousness to where there's certain levels of other realms that even where in one frequency, there's other realms that could even be occupying the same space as Earth, but it's a different time or just a complete different vibration realm. Then you hit what I call the other 90%, which are pure thought form realms that there's no planets, there's no stars, almost like realms of imagination is the only way I can describe it. And then you hit what I call a realm that's like a kaleidoscope. And I call this the angelic or celestial realms or the angelic kingdom, to where there is all these different forms of intelligence that can come and go. And it almost like looks like you're living in a living kaleidoscope. There's everything's going fractal and you're within it and you're a part of it. And then you hit this void, and then you're plugged into what I call source. God created the main, I call it. It's like, I could even describe it as a samadhi, nirvana type state. But the way I describe it is that the body computer cannot even integrate what's going on at that state of consciousness, because you're in a higher state of consciousness that part of it can be filtering through to the visions and that connected with the human brain. But what's really going on is that you're hitting such a high realm from the spirit or soul part of you that you're plugged into the mainframe of all that is, that's the all-knowing part. You know everything that has ever will happen. You know everything. But when you come back to the body, it's like all these filters are put back on because the human brain can't decode what you experienced in that state. And that's why I say the extraterrestrials are the very bottom part of it, including us, because they're trying to reach these higher states of consciousness as well. If they're in a body, they're trying to reach the higher states of consciousness where you're more in a shapeless, formless, energetic body is the only way I could describe it. No arms, no legs. You're just a gaseous, plasma-ish. I don't even know if that's what it is, but it's the only way I can describe it. It's almost like shapeless, formless energy. And that's what I believe is what is us, our true form that overlaps the body when we come to incarnate, even though reincarnation's illusionary, because the way it's been shown to me is everything's happening at once.
Yeah. A lot of this is way over my head to understand. And I think it will be for some of my listeners, but I find it fascinating. I mean, of course, we can't say for sure any of these things. I mean, we have no way to say 100% that you're right or someone else is right or you're wrong or, and so I think it's very fascinating, this whole.
This is why I don't do much interviews anymore. I really don't, because there's people I can talk to about this, and it's not about being right or wrong. It's probably more about, can it be fathomed? Can it be digestible?
Right.
That's the hard thing, because like I say, you're not going to understand. And it's no disrespect to you or any of the listeners, but a lot of people just aren't going to get it unless they've had an experience to do with it. That may go, all right, well, maybe it was like that, because it sounds similar to what I've experienced. And that's why I do what I do now, is I just want to help people help themselves find the truth in them, not from me, not from you, not from anyone else. It's something where you just tell your story, tell your experience, your insight, your knowledge, your wisdom, and everyone is a part of what's going on, but everyone's at a different, not even just a different level. It's just everyone's experiences are different, so everyone brings something different to the plate.
So how would one open themselves up to be able to experience more of these things? I mean, it sounds like you worked on this for years.
I spent 3.5 years locked up, and all I did was remote view or meditate 8 to 12 hours a day. And I still do that between an hour to 4 hours a day now. My practices, that's it. That's where it led me. I had to own it. I really had to own it, because most of my experiences starting out were physical. And then I started to get all this non-physical stuff, and I had to backtrack to understand how this worked for me. So I forgot your question, sorry.
Well, it's basically how would one open themselves up to this experience, or attempt to, I should say.
One thing is, don't open yourself up to anything and everything. I've seen lives ruined from that, where we could say demonic, archonic, negative things can start to happen or people experience. And I'll tell you something. I know some of the people in the big ghost hunting shows that are on telly. What a lot of people aren't aware of or what they're doing before and after the show is they're doing what we call a clearing, like a prayer intention. And they do that so when they go in, they've got some form of protection. And when they leave, nothing's following them home. So unfortunately, a lot of people in this community, they go out for sky watches and they're setting an intention and they're opening up, but they're opening up to anything, which in some cases starts to cause detrimental experiences to happen in their life and ramifications. So I say, one's the intention of wanting to be open to the experience. Two is making sure there's what you'd be connected to on a soul level, or that is in line with the awakening healing of humanity, the earth, that's there for a peaceful experience to help us learn more about us and them. And then it's all about being the observer from that point. It's nothing that is that hard, but sometimes patience is called for. And I know that some people expect you just go out and it might happen straight away, and it doesn't a few times, so they just throw it out, the baby with the bathwater, and go, that's it. But sometimes it might be to get into a meditative state to relax your mind so you can be open to perceiving these things. That it seems to be the more that you can be in tune with your feelings and your emotions and almost be the observer, then a reactionary mode that you can start to experience things through just purely being the observer. Because I think what blocks a lot of people out when they try to go into these consciousness type of experiments to see the crafts and what have you is they're trying to control what they're going to see, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, where it's not like they're a dog on anyone's leash. But if you've risen to the occasion and you're open to these types of experiences with positive beings, you might be surprised what might come, even if you've got to sit there for some time and wait for something to happen. There's been some crazy experiments I've done where I had a scientist for the Australian government. I won't go into too much more detail because I don't want to pinpoint it onto the person. And I was sitting next to each other, and I said, all we're going to do is we're just going to stare at that tree for 5 minutes. That's all we're going to do. Well, within about 2 minutes, smoke came in, and an Aboriginal human, Australian Aboriginal, manifested wearing a red cloth around it, and it had 4 white dots paint on the chest and the stomach, and 2 squiggly lines down the middle. And then it dematerialized. It was there probably for like a few seconds, and then it dematerialized again. And he goes, did you see that? And I said, yeah. And he goes, what did you see? And I told him what I saw, which I just described. And he's like, what the hell? How does that work? And it was just the intention to do it. We're in the middle of absolutely nowhere, but we were open to experience it. And like I said, don't control it. All we're going to do is stare at this tree. It could have been anything. It could have been a craft come. It could have been an orb. It could have been anything happen. And then another time we did an intention experiment, we actually had, I think, 7 of us there. And what was crazy was that we saw a square, it was like a rectangular craft that was sharp on the edges, probably about 9 foot long, about 1 foot high, and it came out of gum trees, turned like that, and it went straight into the earth. And everyone saw it. And what was weird is at that time we were walking to leave that area, and the person who had this big spotlight torch, we all captured it because we saw it happen while the short torch was shining in that area. If we didn't have the torch out, we wouldn't have seen it because we were in darkness. But that was another intention experiment where we've set the intention for something to happen. We saw a lot, but the main thing we saw was that, and that was when we were about to leave. Wow. So it's the intention is the key behind it.
Well, what about, you mentioned remote viewing quite a bit, and how does that play into the whole experience?
Well, you see, remote viewing, the way I talk about it again is that you've got to kick your human mind to the side. So anything that you doubt, anything that you second guess, sometimes you can put it in an AOL section, which is analytical mind, an abbreviation we could say of what that would mean. Just anything analytical coming in, you might be second guessing it, the human part. Sometimes that information will be right, but what you're really doing is, now I do free flow remote viewing, which is sort of my own technique that I came up with, but very much similar to a lot of people that operate the way I do, where they're not using the paper. Because usually you'll be given two target or eight numbers, which are two sets of 4-digit numbers. You do an ideogram, which is a squiggle, which is like the numbers represent the target, which in this case, let's say it was a Soviet base that's on a photograph with a line to it with the two sets of 4-digit numbers. That's put in an envelope and it's handed to somebody else. Let's say the remote viewer. All the remote viewers got is those two sets of 4-digit numbers, which basically the way I reckon it works is that because the person has allocated those numbers to the photograph, now in the realm of consciousness, those numbers that have been written down are allocated to that. So when it's given to this person, if they psychically work through it remote viewing, they're linked to the object in the photo. I hope I'm explaining this properly, like just that's digestible. But bottom story is after they do this, they write down the numbers and they do a squiggle, they start going through textures, colors, dimensions. Basically, you're going through the 5 sense reality and beyond of what you're perceiving. Now, you might not see anything, but you might intuitively draw out a line. But there was times where I started out, one day I drew what looked like a kettle and there was a light and I've drawn a line to it and gone, that's a red light. And my father opened up the target because I was getting him to do targets for me for a while. And it was exactly what I drew out. It was a kettle with a red light. So in a way, remote viewing is working with one's consciousness on how we perceive things. It's a form of communication to find out information. But when you're using it to actually really have real-time communication, you're not using the paper or anything, though some can do that. You're using not just your 5 senses, but your mind's eye, your thoughts, and your feelings as extra senses to go multidimensional, to communicate multidimensionally. So this is where I say the problem with a lot of this is that psychics and people that are developed in these areas, they get information, but really what's happening is if they're not meeting them halfway, it's like the extraterrestrial or the spirit, whatever, is throwing a jigsaw puzzle of information at them that's coming at them multidimensionally. It's just bang. Where if you're interfacing with them and you can meet them halfway and go through a question type of thing, what's happening is you're projecting the thought, what thoughts, feelings, visions come back as an answer, project another thought, what thoughts, feelings, visions come back as an answer, but you're almost using a remote viewing technique to do it in real time. You could say almost like a conversation, but partly front-loaded because you're actually knowing or you're seeing what you're interfacing with in the form of that. So remote viewing is something that is a very practical tool, but at the same time, the way that I'm communicating isn't remote viewing. Remote viewing helped me to get where I am, to be able to use my abilities in that way or to harness them that I think we all have. Because if I didn't do that in meditation for that number of years very intensely, I don't think I'd be where I am now understanding what I know now, which is where extraterrestrial aspect and UFO phenomena is child's play compared to what it leads to. It leads to a greater understanding and sort of experience of what we all are not just are a part of, but what our true nature is beyond the physical form of the human experience. So, but you've got to be really careful. There's remote viewers that are very strongly remote viewers in the terms of if you have somebody like Dr. Greer, for example, he talks about remote viewing, but he's doing it in a meditative type state with groups. If you had somebody that were part of the military remote viewing hear that, they go, that's not remote viewing. They've staunchly, that's not remote viewing. It's got to be done this way that we're doing with Project Stargate and the way that Ed Dames and Joseph McMonigal and all those guys, it's got to be done that way. That's what remote viewing is. It can't be done this other way. But I think what's happening is people have been able to adapt to it to what I've got with my own technique, which I call free-flowing remote viewing, where you're basically doing the technique, but you're using it to interface not just with the beings, but to even initiate it as well.
Interesting. I remember hearing Lou Elizondo saying that someone that was involved in the TTSA above his pay grade claimed that he thought that things were demonic. I just wanted to hear your reaction to that.
Claimed what was demonic exactly?
The UFOs were demonic. That's what he told Lou Elizondo. His thoughts.
I can tell you personally, demons don't need a UFO. Most of these intelligences don't even need a craft. No way at all. They will just appear. They can just appear. That's where they're dealing at. So that he might be talking about something that may have negative intentions, and that's the way that he's perceived it. But angels and demons do exist, my friend, and they do not need a craft. Not at all.
Yeah. So I guess the question I have to ask you, whatever these things are and you're saying that some of them are not even, a physical form, but what do they want? Why are they saying hello?
Well, that's what I was saying before. It's like driving into LA and seeing all these different people and everyone's got a different agenda. But in my case, it's been a revelation of who I am, what I'm here to experience in some way that I find through the experiences, but it's really me finding that out. And also partly of what I'm a part of here on Earth with yourself and every single being on this planet. That there is a shift in consciousness, a leap in evolution going on, and it's time to sort of wake up to the full potential of what we are. These beings aren't to be looked up to. This is the problem. You either have one aspect where people get into this and they get right into the spiritual aspect and they think that these beings are going to solve all their problems, or you go into the other side and then people don't want to acknowledge the consciousness aspect, and you've got another flip side to that where everything's demonic, everything's negative. But what I can tell you from my own experience is there is a dark force out there, but there is also an amazing loving force out there that loves us more than anyone can possibly imagine unless they've had these type of experiences. And what I say to people is how you can gauge what is the fruit of the information. Is the information about you becoming a better person, being of service, working on some of the stuff that you may need to work on yourself? Is it the opposite of that? Or is it nonsensical, which would be the trickster energy in the middle? Or as I said, the opposite stuff would be the dark stuff. And so that's where I look at the information. How's this helping me become a better person? How's it helping me be productive, work on myself, play my part in humanity? But at the same time, they're not going to solve our problems. The human race has to do this themselves to realize what they're actually truly capable of. And that's why nothing is got fixed by the extraterrestrials, because it's not their place to do that. It's for us to find that within us, to rise to the occasion to do it ourselves.
Right. I remember listening to now we had a case here in Maine. We've got about 4 minutes left to the show. We had a case here in Maine where I live, and it's called the Allagash incident. And there were 4. You've heard of it?
Yeah.
There were 4, people abducted. And Jack, I've interviewed Jim Wiener, and Jack, his twin brother, said that the overall experience in all these years have gone by, and he's had things happen since then. And he said something pretty remarkable. He said, it's about love. And you just mentioned that. He said, it's about an incredible love, which that would give hope to,
It does. It does. I think part of the human experience from my point of view is about not just about love, but learning from the experience in terms of why I believe we're all experiencing this, and we have many experiences that we experience in many other planets and star systems, galaxies and realms, is because we're all one consciousness interacting with itself, but we leave that higher state to go and experience and gain knowledge for the overall collective, and it has to be a different experience for everyone. And I think with the human experience, it's learning things like love, compassion, forgiveness, non-judgment in such a dense form that sort of amplifies our soul growth, because it's almost like we're putting ourselves through a test of all tests being here doing this. I know that, again, I can't prove that to anyone. All I can tell you is that over the years of my experiences, that's the conclusion I've come to from the messages, the experiences, the knowledge and wisdom that I've sort of gleaned through having a life like this.
Interesting. Well, we're just about out of time. Can you tell us when we'll be able to see this movie?
It's out right now. It's on, depending on your country. So I know that in the UK, I think Canada and America, it's available on Amazon. In other countries, I might have to just get it on Vimeo at this time. It's also available on iTunes, Google Play, Vimeo, Voodoo, a handful of other ones as well. So it's pretty much, people can look around and find it. It's been out for probably just over a month now.
Oh, I didn't even know I would have watched it ahead of this show. If I'd known, I could have accessed it. So you're saying in the United States we can watch it on Amazon? Is that right?
Yeah, it's on there now.
Okay.
Yeah. It's either something that people love or hate. It's got more 5 stars than it has 1 stars. I'll say that, but people either love it, people either hate it. Either way, it's all good.
All right. Okay, Peter. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. You take care. All right, everyone. So that's it for the show tonight. Thank you so much for watching. The links will be up I'm going to put those video links up in the show notes, so check them out there. Next week, we have Kevin Hale. I think he's a bit of a skeptic. I don't really remember for sure, but he's going to be on the show next week. So tune in on next Tuesday at 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And thanks so much, everyone. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.